The knock wasn't loud, but the paper she held hit me harder than a bullet. A cream envelope, my name in bold, and below it, Sophia Langley Carter, my daughter, the one who hadn't spoken to me in nearly 3 decades. Inside was an invitation, Thanksgiving dinner. Nothing unusual, except it arrived 3 days after every news station plastered my face with headlines, "Local bookshop owner wins $500 million Powerball." You think coincidences like that just happen not in this life. For 28 years, Sophia treated me like I didn't exist. She walked out during a fight so vicious I still hear the echo in my nightmares. I raised her alone after her father bailed when she was 4, worked 2 jobs, lived on diner coffee, and determination just so she could have ballet classes, tutoring a shot at a life I never had. And then one winter night, she said words no mother should hear. "You're nothing but a burden. Stay out of my life." I honored that request. Until today. Until this envelope showed up like a ghost with perfect timing. The truth is, our war didn't start with that letter. It started 28 years ago at a housewarming party that felt more like a coronation. I was 37 back then, still smelling like fryer oil from the diner when I walked into her Georgian-style palace, marble floors, chandeliers, and people with last names that sounded like law firms. Sophia had traded in her jeans and laughter for designer silk and silence. Her fiancé, Carter Langley, came from a family where money wasn't just wealth, it was power old and smug, the kind that made you feel like breathing their air was a privilege. I told myself to swallow the humiliation, the whispers about the help, the way Carter's mother sized me up like a misplaced object. It wasn't about me, it was about Sophia being happy, or so I thought. But that night, while guests sipped champagne, I found Sophia in the kitchen, mascara streaked fingers clutching a crystal glass like it was a lifeline. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I asked, my stomach sinking when she yanked her sleeve down to hide a bruise. "Nothing, Mom. Just Carter wants everything perfect for the wedding." Carter needed. Carter insisted. Every sentence started the same, and something inside me snapped. "Listen to yourself," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "When was the last time you mentioned what you want? This isn't the daughter I raised. That man doesn't love you. Sophia, he owns you." Her face hardened like stone. "You're jealous. Carter gave me everything you couldn't: respect, security, a real future." "What have you ever given me but embarrassment?" The words landed like knives, but the next ones gutted me. "You're toxic. Stay out of my life." I reached for her, but she stepped back like my touch was poison. And just like that, I was erased. I waited for the call that never came. Sent birthday cards, Christmas presents, letters I rewrote 100 times before mailing. Each one came back unopened or worse, ignored. I drove by their house, once saw her in the garden, pregnant with my first grandchild. I called her name. She looked at me and turned away. That was the day I understood. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. I went home and stared at the walls of my tiny apartment, every photo of her like a wound I couldn't stop reopening. That night, I cried until there was nothing left inside me but a single, searing truth. If I was nothing to her, I'd become something to myself. So I started small. Worked every holiday shift at the diner, the kind no one wanted. Changed the channel when diaper commercials came on. Stopped walking past playgrounds because the laughter sounded like knives. Then slowly survival turned into strategy. Thursday nights I signed up for community college classes, accounting first, then business. The textbooks filled hours that used to ache with silence. By year 5, I had a spreadsheet where my grief used to be. The habit of saving once for Sophia's future shifted toward a dream I barely dared name: a bookstore. Not a chain, a place with worn leather chairs and the smell of coffee, where stories could knit broken people back together. Sophia once told me it was stupid. "Bookstores are dying, Mom. Stick to what you know." And for years, I believed her, until the night my heart tried to kill me. It was a Tuesday. One moment, I was pouring coffee for Mr. Finch. The next, my chest was a vice, and the diner floor was rushing up to meet me. "Heart attack," the doctor said. Later, their voices flat clinical. Not massive, but enough to change everything. 3 days in the cardiac ward gave me clarity no therapist ever could. While other patients had spouses holding their hands, children bringing flowers, my only visitor was Dottie, the diner manager, with a romance novel and a bag of sugar-free candy. "Is there someone we should call a nurse?" asked gently. I thought of Sophia, wondered if she'd come if I summoned her to a deathbed. The uncertainty was answer enough. "No," I said. "There's no one." That night, staring at a ceiling stained by fluorescent light, I realized I'd been waiting like my life was on pause, like everything after that fight was an intermission. But what if this was the show? What if the credits were rolling and I was still waiting for an apology that would never come? The thought terrified me more than dying, so I made a decision. When I walked out of that hospital, I wasn't just going back to life, I was building one worth living. Education, health, money, freedom. The plan took shape like a battle map on my kitchen table. Weekends at the diner, weekdays in class. A business degree by 60, investments small, at first, then bolder, as I learned. My apartment became a war room of sticky notes and color-coded calendars. And for the first time in decades, I felt something like hope. By 57, I'd lost 20 pounds, built an investment portfolio bigger than my wildest dreams, and earned a 3.9 GPA. By 60, I walked across a stage in cap and gown to applause from friends I'd made along the way, people who chose me not out of obligation, but because they saw my worth. A year later, I signed the lease on my dream, a little brick storefront with tall windows and the scent of possibility. Langley Books and Brew. On opening day, as I arranged paperbacks and listened to the espresso machine hum, I whispered to myself, "You did this, Evelyn." Because that's who I was now, a woman defined by her own choices, not her daughter's rejection. The void was still there, but it no longer consumed me. And then came the headline that changed everything. The morning started like any other. I opened the bookstore early, brewed the first pot of coffee, and flipped the open sign. A local news anchor's voice droned from the tiny TV behind the counter, listing winning lottery numbers I hadn't thought about since I bought a ticket on a whim. Powerball jackpot $500 million. My eyes drifted to the crumpled ticket in my wallet. Just for fun, I told myself, unfolding it with zero expectation. One number matched, then two, then all six. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My knees went weak, and I gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. $500 million. Me. Evelyn Langley, the waitress turned bookstore owner who used to count pennies for gas. The world didn't explode. Customers still strolled in for their morning lattes. Somewhere a delivery truck honked. But inside me, the ground split open. By noon, the bookstore buzzed with rumors. Someone claimed they saw the winning ticket sold at our neighborhood gas station. I smiled, handed out coffee, and pretended nothing had changed, because in a way, nothing had. I still had bills to pay, still had shelves to stock, still had a heart stitched together with scars that money couldn't erase. But that night, as cameras flashed at a press conference I couldn't avoid, the truth hit: my life had just become a headline. Local bookshop owner wins. Big reporters camped outside my apartment. Old acquaintances suddenly remembered my number. Proposals, yes, actual marriage proposals, flooded my inbox. Malcolm, my attorney, insisted on an emergency meeting. "You need security," he said, sliding a folder thick with legal jargon across his mahogany desk. "A relocation plan, asset protection, PR strategy. I want to keep my bookstore." I countered, my voice sharp. He blinked like I'd spoken in tongues. "Evelyn, you could buy 50 bookstores and never work a day again." "I don't want 50, I want mine." That became our refrain. They talked about blind trusts. I talked about purpose. They talked about maximizing growth. I talked about meaning. The money was dizzying, a tidal wave I couldn't control. But beneath the euphoria lurked a bitter truth. Wealth didn't mend old wounds. It didn't dial Sophia's number or erase 28 years of silence until the envelope arrived. A cream-colored card with embossed lettering. My name, Evelyn Carter, written in a hand I hadn't seen in decades. "Thanksgiving dinner. It's been too long. Please come." No mention of Carter's scandal splashed across every financial news outlet. No acknowledgement of the years I spent begging for scraps of connection. Just 6 words pretending 28 years could vanish like steam on a mirror. The timing was exquisite. 3 days after the lottery made me a walk-in fortune, my estranged daughter found her way back to family values. Coincidence, please. I set the invitation on my mantle and stared at it for hours, the paper burning like a brand in my peripheral vision. For a moment, a dangerous, fleeting moment, I imagined saying yes, walking through that door, hearing Mom again without bitterness lace through it, meeting the grandchildren I'd only watched from a distance like some lonely ghost. Then reality slammed back. This wasn't reconciliation, it was triage. Sophia's world was crumbling. Carter, once the golden boy of finance, now faced federal charges for fraud. Their mansion listed for sale, assets frozen, friends scattering like pigeons from a gunshot. And here, I was the perfect solution wrapped in a Powerball-sized bow. I could have ignored it. Tossed the card, locked the door, and let silence finish the work it started decades ago. But something in me wanted more than that. Not revenge closure, an ending on my terms. So I called Malcolm. Draw up the documents, I said. What kind of documents? The kind that makes my intentions clear. And Malcolm, make them bulletproof. He hesitated. Evelyn, you're sure I've never been sure. The week before Thanksgiving blurred into strategy sessions and signatures. 3 irrevocable trusts, one for education, one for small business grants, one for artists over 30. None for Carter, none for Sophia. The money was no longer a tool for leverage. It was a weapon against my own weakness, against the temptation to buy my way into a love that should have been unconditional. Still the night before, the dinner doubt crept in like fog. I sat in my townhouse. Yes, I'd upgraded, though not to the fortress Malcolm wanted, and stared at a single photo of Sophia as a child, pigtails, missing front tooth, a smile so wide it could have split the world open. Where did you go? I whispered to the empty room. I didn't expect an answer, but the next day I planned to deliver one of my own. Thanksgiving dawned sharp and bright. I dressed like a woman who belonged anywhere, a tailored suit, simple pearls, confidence like armor. No flash, no glitter, just presence. As the car rolled toward Sophia's new address, smaller, humbler, stripped of its former grandeur, I rehearsed the words I'd waited 28 years to say. Not I forgive you, not I'm here to help, but this I see you, and I refuse to be used. What I didn't anticipate was what that conversation would ignite. The house looked tired, like it had been holding its breath for too long. Faded siding, a crooked basketball hoop weeds pushing through cracks in the driveway, a far cry from the Langley estate, where I'd once been treated like an intruder at my own daughter's wedding. When I stepped out of the car, the front door opened, and there she was, Sophia. Time had polished her edges, but not softened them. Her hair was glossy, colored to perfection, but her eyes carried shadows money couldn't hide. The smile she offered was practiced, brittle, the kind you wear for cameras that aren't there anymore. Mom, she said, like the word tasted foreign. I came, I answered simply. Inside the living room felt staged, like a showroom, scrambling to fake warmth, fresh flowers in mismatched vases, family photos that looked like they'd been dug out of storage just for today. Carter stood near the fireplace, his once commanding presence eroded into something gaunt and restless. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were frantic, scanning me like I was an investor he needed to impress. Welcome, Evelyn. Can I get you a drink? Sparkling water, I replied, keeping my voice even. James appeared next 30, now tall, like his father, but with Sophia's eyes. He extended a stiff hand. Grandmother, good to finally meet you properly. The formality stung. Properly, as if I'd never tried. Emma hovered in the background, arms folded, her expression a puzzle. Her resemblance to me at that age startled me, the same stubborn jaw, the same guarded curiosity. Dinner was a study in controlled chaos. The table groaned under the weight of effort, a small turkey store-bought Rolls wine poured into glasses that didn't match. Conversation lurched like a car with a broken transmission, safe topics, strained laughter, silences that yawned wider than the gap of years between us. Then, halfway through the meal, Sophia slid into the real reason I was there. We were so thrilled to hear about your good fortune, she said lightly, refilling my water glass with a hand that trembled just enough to notice. The bookstore must be doing wonderfully. It's holding its own, I said. Though the lottery changed a few things. Emma's fork clinked against her plate. Amazing how money changes perspectives, she murmured, voice sharp enough to cut glass. Sophia shot her a warning look. Emma, what? Emma shrugged. We're pretending this isn't about the lottery, that we'd all be sitting here if she was still just a bookstore owner. The air went knife-edge silent. I set my fork down, deliberately. She's not wrong, I said. And since we're done pretending, let's be honest. You didn't invite me here because you missed me. You invited me because your world is collapsing. Carter's jaw tightened. Evelyn, we're not asking for charity, just family helping family through a rough patch. Family, I repeated, tasting the word like spoiled milk. Interesting concept coming from people who erased me for 28 years. Sophia's face crumpled. I made mistakes. I said things I didn't mean. No, I corrected gently. You meant every word. You just didn't anticipate the consequences. Her eyes filled, and for a flicker of a moment I saw the little girl who used to curl against me during thunderstorms. It almost broke me, almost. But then Carter leaned forward, voice slick with desperation disguised as charm. Look, I've got a new venture in the works. Completely separate from my previous firm. Solid low risk. If you'd consider a short-term infusion. Stop, Sophia, snapped her veneer cracking. This isn't the time. Oh, I think it's exactly the time, I said, reaching for my purse. Their faces lit up with naked hope that made my stomach twist. I pulled out a slim leather portfolio and placed it on the table. You wanted clarity. Here it is. Inside were documents, trust agreements, foundation charters, legal seals gleaming under the chandelier's harsh light. I've established 3 irrevocable trusts, I said, my voice steady. One funds education for single parents. One supports small businesses for people over 50. The third provides grants for mid-career artists. Emma's head jerked up, something sparking in her eyes. All 3 are fully funded. None can be accessed for legal fees, lifestyle maintenance, or financial triage. Not by you, not by anyone. Carter's face went crimson. James stared at the table. Sophia's tears spilled silently onto her plate. You're refusing to help us, she whispered. I'm refusing to be used, I replied. There's a difference. Her composure shattered. After everything I reached out, tried to make amends. 3 days after the lottery made me rich, I cut in. After 28 years of silence, after every birthday card, every Christmas gift, every letter I sent came back unopened. Carter shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against hardwood. This is cruel. You're punishing her for ancient history. No, I said calmly. I'm ending a cycle. Closing a door that's been cracked open for too long, I reached into my bag again and placed a smaller package on the table. Sophia opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a leather-bound album, embossed on the cover, 28 years. What is this? She asked, voice raw. Every card I sent, every photo I took from a distance at birthdays and graduations I wasn't invited to, every attempt I made to bridge the gap you insisted on. She flipped through the pages, her face a map of regret and disbelief. James leaned closer, his expression darkening with understanding. I didn't come here for revenge, I said softly. I came to end this on my terms, to say goodbye, properly, something we never did. Sophia reached for me, then stopped, her hand hovering in the air like a white flag too late to matter. You can't just leave, she choked out. We're family. I stood, smoothing the crease in my slacks. We shared DNA. That's not the same thing. And for the first time in 28 years, I walked away without looking back. On the drive home, the city lights blurred through tears I refused to name. Not triumph, not revenge, something quieter, heavier relief laced with grief. I thought closure would feel clean, like slamming a door. Instead, it felt like setting down a weight I'd carried so long it had become part of me. The truth crystallized as clearly as the frost on my townhouse windows. Love doesn't vanish because you're wronged. It lingers like a ghost whispering what ifs. But I couldn't live haunted anymore. For decades, I believed reconciliation was the finish line. Tonight, I understood the truth. Sometimes survival means rewriting the map, not finding the old road, but carving a new one, alone if you have to. And for the first time in 28 years, I wasn't afraid of that. The morning after that dinner, silence settled over my townhouse like fresh snow, clean cold and strangely liberating. No more waiting for a call that might never come. No more bending myself into shapes to fit someone else's definition of family. For the first time in decades, the future was a blank page, and I held the pen. I started with the trusts. The ink had barely dried on the legal papers before the applications began flooding in. Letters from single mothers juggling two jobs while chasing degrees, small business owners whose dreams were dying because banks laughed at them, painters, poets, and photographers who had talent but not time. Reading their stories cracked something open in me. For years, I'd believed my purpose died the night Sophia slammed that door. But purpose doesn't die. It hides waiting for you to grow brave enough to find it. So I rolled up my sleeves. This wasn't about handing out checks like candy at a parade. It was about strategy, sustainability, building something that would outlive me. Malcolm introduced me to financial architects who spoke a language I barely understood, but I learned. I asked questions until their condescension turned into respect. Most lottery winners burn through their fortune in 5 years, one advisor said. Then I guess I'll be the exception, I replied. The bookstore stayed my anchor. Langley Books and Brew became more than a business, it became a sanctuary. We hosted literacy nights for adults who'd slipped through the cracks, open mic poetry slams that packed the aisles, free coffee for veterans on Fridays. My customers weren't transactions, they were stories, living and breathing reminders that wealth means nothing if it doesn't ripple outward. Word spread. Local news morphed into national coverage. The philanthropic Powerball winner, from waitress to game changer. My inbox swelled with invitations, galas, panels, talk shows. Once upon a time, I might have basked in the validation. Now I saw them for what they were, noise. But not all attention was shallow. Some of it mattered, like the email from Grace Holloway, a former waitress turned nonprofit warrior who pitched an idea that lit me up: mobile libraries for rural towns. Within months, we had 2 vans wrapped in bright murals delivering books where Wi-Fi barely reached. Every project stitched another tear in the fabric of my old life. Not to erase the pain, but to make something useful from it. And then, on a rain-streaked Thursday, an envelope arrived, not cream this time, but plain white hand, addressed in a shaky script I knew by heart. Mom, please meet me. No Carter. No agenda. Just us. Saturday noon, the diner on Maple, the one you used to take me to after ballet. Please. For a full minute, I just stared, the ink swimming as tears blurred my vision. My first instinct was suspicion. Was this another ploy? A softer pitch, but the words felt raw, stripped of polish. The choice of location, the diner, our old ritual, gnawed at my defenses. Saturday came like a storm front. I dressed simply: jeans, a navy sweater, no pearls, no armor. When I pushed open the diner door, the smell of bacon and coffee hit me like a time machine. And there she was, alone, hunched over a chipped mug, looking smaller than I remembered. Mom, she whispered when I slid into the booth. Up close, the cracks were deeper lines etched by stress eyes rimmed red. She looked less like the queen of marble halls and more like the little girl who once spilled milkshakes across this very table. I'm not here to ask for money, she said, before I could speak. I swear, I didn't know who else to call. Carter's gone. The kids barely speak to me. And I don't know how to start over. Her voice broke on the last word. And for the first time in 28 years, I saw her, not the polished facade, not the weaponized pride, but the fragile human underneath. Something inside me shifted. Not a floodgate swinging open, not instant forgiveness, just a soft, cautious loosening of the knot I'd carried so long. I can't fix your life, Sophia, I said quietly. I won't try, but I can listen if you're ready to tell the truth. She nodded, tears sliding unchecked. And for the next 2 hours, we talked, not as savior and supplicant, not as lottery winner and fallen heiress, but as 2 women scarred by choices, fumbling toward something that might someday resemble peace. When we stood to leave, she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. But I didn't promise anything either. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, but maybe, just maybe, you can build a new path that runs alongside the ruins. That night I sat by my window, city lights shimmering through the rain, and realized something profound. The win that mattered most wasn't $500 million. It was this, a chance, however fragile, to write a new ending. And this time the pen was in both our hands. The weeks after that diner meeting unfolded like the slow thaw of winter. Nothing dramatic, no teary reunions, no overnight healing, just a cautious rhythm, like two dancers relearning the steps of a song they both half remembered. Sophia called sometimes. Short conversations, at first awkward and stilted, like strangers fumbling for common ground. We talked about weather, about books she claimed she'd read, but probably hadn't, about the grandchildren I'd only seen in photographs. There were no apologies grand enough to erase 28 years, no promises fragile enough to trust. And yet, something fragile and necessary began to root itself, a willingness to try. But here's what surprised me most. I didn't crave her approval anymore. For decades, I measured my worth in the reflection of her eyes, whether they sparkled with pride or burned with resentment. That night in the diner, something broke free. I realized her choices were never a referendum on my value. They were hers to own and mine to release. The past stopped being a prison and became what it always should have been, a lesson. So I built a life that wasn't an act of defiance or a plea for attention, but a declaration of self. My mornings began with coffee at the bookstore, sunlight spilling through wide windows onto dog-eared novels and mismatched armchairs. The hum of conversation, the rustle of pages, that was my cathedral. Every Friday we hosted open mics. People stood trembling at the mic, clutching poems scribbled on napkins, voices cracking as they spoke truths they'd buried for years. Watching them felt like watching pieces of my old self rise from the ashes. Vulnerable, brave, free. The mobile libraries became a movement. Grace and I expanded the fleet to 5 vans, bright splashes of color, rolling into forgotten corners of the map. Each time I saw a child clutch a borrowed book like treasure, I thought, this, this is what money should do, open doors that poverty nailed shut. Malcolm once joked that I'd turned philanthropy into a full-time job. He wasn't wrong, but the work didn't drain me, it sustained me. For the first time in decades, my days weren't about surviving loss. They were about creating abundance. And still, there were moments, quiet, unguarded, when the ache returned. Seeing a mother and daughter laughing over lattes in my shop, hearing Emma's voice on a voicemail meant for Sophia. Those pangs didn't undo me anymore. They reminded me I was human, stitched together by both wounds and wonders. Sophia and I carved new boundaries. She never asked for money again, not directly. Maybe pride stopped her, or maybe my silence spoke louder than any lecture could. What I offered instead was time, coffee dates, hesitant holiday texts, the occasional Saturday stroll through the farmer's market. Small bridges built from honesty, not obligation. The grandchildren were a different story. James remained distant, but Emma surprised me. One afternoon she showed up at the bookstore, rain dripping from her jacket, defiance in her eyes. Mom told me everything, she said flatly, about the fight, about the years, about you. I braced for blame, but it never came. Instead, she asked, "Can I see the trusts?" That conversation lasted 3 hours. By closing time, Emma had sketched out a plan for a literacy program targeting teens aging out of foster care. She didn't want a handout. She wanted a partnership. Looking at her, fire in her eyes, conviction in her voice, I felt something I hadn't in years, hope that the legacy I was building might outlive my regrets. We launched the program 6 months later. Emma ran it like a general marshaling troops, relentless and radiant. Watching her work was like watching Sophia's best qualities, tenacity, intelligence, reborn without the rot of arrogance. One evening after a board meeting, Emma lingered. "Grandma," she said, the word hesitant, tasting foreign, "thanks for not giving up on us, even when we didn't deserve it." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat sharp as glass. "Thank you for letting me try," I whispered. Driving home that night, city lights flashing past like Morse code, I thought about the strange symmetry of it all. I'd spent half my life waiting for love to return through a door I kept propped open. Turns out the love I'd been chasing came back through a side window I never expected, smaller, humbler, but no less real. And maybe that's the secret healing isn't a thunderclap. It's a series of small mercies, ordinary moments strung together, until one day you wake up and realize the weight you carried is gone. I'm not the woman who begged for scraps of affection anymore. I'm not the mother defined by abandonment or the waitress counting coins for gas. I'm Evelyn Langley, a woman who turned grief into grit, who turned a windfall into a wildfire of good. And for the first time in 28 years, I can look in the mirror and say this without flinching: I am enough. The first snow of the season fell the night I signed the final set of papers for the foundation. Big, lazy flakes drifting past my window like feathers shaken loose from the sky. The city hummed quietly beneath the hushed streetlights glowing like embers. I stood there with a pen still warm in my hand and realized something that stopped me cold for the first time in nearly 3 decades. My life wasn't about reclaiming what I'd lost. It was about building what I'd never had: peace, not the fragile peace of walking on eggshells around people who confuse control for love, not the desperate peace of pretending old wounds don't ache, but the fierce, unshakable peace that comes when you finally choose yourself without apology. Looking back, it's almost laughable, the version of me who thought survival meant shrinking, who believed love had to be earned like overtime wages. If I could reach across time and whisper in her ear, I'd say, stop waiting for permission to matter. You already do. My world today is messy and imperfect and gloriously mine. The bookstore hums with life, a patchwork of stories and strangers who've become something like family. The literacy vans crisscross rural highways, carrying hope in cardboard boxes. Emma sends me spreadsheets at midnight, her ambition burning bright enough to light up the dark places we both crawled through. Even Sophia, complicated, wounded Sophia, calls sometimes just to hear my voice. And when she does, I don't brace for impact anymore. I just listen. But here's the truth: no headline about lottery winners ever prints. The money didn't save me, it amplified me. If you're broken, wealth doesn't heal you, it just gives your cracks a spotlight. Healing only comes when you do the brutal, beautiful work of becoming whole on your own terms. People ask if I regret those 28 lost years. The answer isn't simple. I regret the pain, yes. The milestones missed the laughter we never shared. But I don't regret the lessons buried inside the wreckage, because they taught me what no amount of comfort could: that love without respect is just control in a prettier dress. That boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you choose who to open for. That starting over at 40, at 50, at 60 isn't just possible, it's powerful. Most of all, I learned this: you don't need to win $500 million to rewrite your story. You just need to stop waiting for someone else to hand you the pen. The night deepened outside my window, the snow piling soft against the glass. I closed the ledger, turned off the lamp, and whispered a quiet thank you to the woman I was, to the storms that shaped me, to the grace that carried me here. Then I did something that used to terrify me. I made plans, not for survival, not for reconciliation, for joy. Tomorrow I'll open the bookstore early, brew the good coffee, maybe slip a free novel into a kid's backpack when no one's looking. I'll keep building bridges where I can, burning the ones that lead back to cages. Because life isn't about the losses you count, it's about the stories you choose to write next. And this time, my ending won't be quiet. It'll be bold and bright and entirely mine. And if you're listening, if you've ever felt erased, discarded, or defined by someone else's choices, hear this: you are not the sum of what they left behind. You are the author now. Start writing. Life has a brutal way of teaching us that blood ties aren't a guarantee of loyalty, love, or respect. For years, I believed family meant unconditional acceptance, but reality carved a harsher truth: family is chosen every day through actions, not DNA. The greatest freedom comes when you stop chasing validation from people who refuse to see your worth and start building a life anchored in self-respect. Walking away wasn't easy. It never is. But sometimes closing a door isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's saying, I deserve better, and meaning it. Because the moment you tie your happiness to someone else's approval, you hand them the keys to your peace. Winning the lottery didn't change me, it revealed me. It showed me that money can amplify joy or magnify misery depending on whether you've done the work of healing first. My wealth wasn't in the zeros on a check, it was in the courage to rewrite my story. And so is yours. If this story strikes a chord, here's the challenge: audit your life for open wounds disguised as what ifs. Stop waiting for apologies that may never come. Start small, learn something new, set a boundary, build a habit that reminds you your future isn't canceled because someone failed you. Invest where return isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity, your health, your education, your passions. And if you can give back, do it in a way that outlives you. Legacy isn't leaving money behind, it's leaving people better than you found them. You don't need $500 million to change your life. You just need one audacious decision to choose yourself loudly, unapologetically, and today.